The weary traveler draws close to the end of the path.
We have never had it so good.
All of this just works.
We are selling tea to China.
You did not have to redeem this, ma'am!
Out with them, forget about them.
Your broadcast is very biased. You've written a lot of ridiculous articles, so I would encourage you to be more journalistic and have more integrity.
Socialism is when the government does stuff.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. And summer is finally around the corner, it seems like, at least where I live. It's been great weather the past couple of days. Back out in the yard doing yard work, picking up trash from the winter. That's how it goes. Ludwig Path, how's your week been?
It's been good, actually. Summer is setting in. I can still see the sun outside, actually. Usually it's dark when we start these streams, so that's been a pleasant surprise. I've also been picking up all kinds of cigarette stumps from smoking Slavs outside of my home. But other than that, it's just been, great mood, great week. I have to adjust to the time shift. That's a bit painful, especially if you have young kids.
We nudged over to daylight savings, I guess reversed daylight saving time this week, which is always a, strangely enough, heated debate going on among my colleagues about whether or not daylight saving times is something we should keep. I'm not sure where that's come from. It sort of snuck up on me that this is something that we're debating.
I even heard that this is something they're discussing in the EU now. And I mean, regardless of this sovereignty debate, I hope that's something that if they decide to get rid of it, I hope Norway follows up on it. I'm firmly against daylight savings time. I don't know where you stand on that. I hope I haven't stepped on some toes by
I have to be honest,
announcing my
I
position.
don't really have a strong position on daylight saving time. Other than, I see the practicality of it just in terms of literally saving daylight in the autumn, but the hassle in the spring isn't really worth it. So I'm not sure if there's any sort of like way to steel man daylight saving time other than, I'd like to have like one more hour of sunlight in the winter.
My counter argument would then just be we have electricity now, so whatever you need, if you need a light source to do work, you can get that from modern machinery.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's just a lot easier to not have to deal, especially from like this computer's point of view, developer point of view, not having to deal with this time shift stuff. It's just a lot easier, I think, for everyone. So,
every time we invite guests on that's not from our time zone, I have to do like triple check which times, because it technically changes time zone when we go into daylight saving time or European summertime, as it's called, or something like that. And that's always a hassle. So now that I've thought about it for 3 seconds, I think I'm on your side, Ludwig.
Yeah,
we can just get rid of it.
It was implemented to be practical, and now we get rid of it to be practical. That's kind of my point of view. Maybe the audience has some other, I've missed some detail here, but
based practical Giga Chad destroys ideological chuds. Very nice.
We're tearing down Chesterton's fence. The demons will come running when daylight savings time is over. Our circadian rhythms will just go off track, and the West will collapse further. I hope not. Right, but we have a couple of interesting
Yeah, I have a
interesting,
chat here from Bill Wilson saying every Thursday comes and I go, wasn't the last episode like 2 days ago? It could have been a week. I have the same feeling. The weeks are moving incredibly fast. I'm like, wait, we just had a Longhouse episode. I have to do it again.
We don't have to do that much content because all of our viewers live on compressed time. So instead of making a video per day, they just forget that the week.
All Longhouse viewers just sort of like go into sleep mode when we're offline, and then they wake up 1 hour before the next week. That's how it works.
Come live 1 hour of the week when the favorite show comes on. That's great. But a few topics we have to go back to Donald Trump, because sometimes the actions of the American government affects us in Europe, and they certainly have now with the new Liberation Day tariffs. I also wanted to do like a quick showcase of Finland's President Alexander Stubb that we haven't visited for years. I think like last time, like we had the Finland episode like many years ago, and Bear Carl talked about him a little bit, but he's been back in the news a little bit, trying to nudge world politics from his little station in Finland and do some smooth diplomacy. And I thought that was kind of worth a little look. So
we have to credit, you gotta credit players for playing, right?
Yes. We need to be students of the international game and give credits to the talented players. And like when we've done those two, we might talk about Musk a little bit, and then look at the kind of the libertarian to CTAR pipeline, which seems to be in full effect still. It's a fascinating phenomenon, but
it seems to
be an
it seems to have been
discussion.
I feel like you and I have had sort of like front row seats to it happening real time to the Norwegian online right over the past couple of months, and the transformation is complete. The metamorphosis is done, and now it's just I can't really distinguish it from just propaganda.
Well, yeah, it does seem to slot quite nicely in, and I don't know what it is about the timings, or if it's because of the contrarianism or something. But now we're reaching in a certain weird stage where it seems like, well, Trump is getting a little bit cold feet. He's trying to offer up all kinds of lucrative peace deals to Putin, and Putin is not interested. I think some Twitter user made the comment that it feels a little bit like the Tucker Carlson interview, where Tucker is like trying to feed Putin the line that it's like the West's fault or something that the war happened, and Putin is more interested. He just wants to talk about like his historical view of the Ukraine-Russia relations. He's not interested in playing that game, and it's kind of the same. Like Trump just tries to feed up concessions, and he's just like, nah. I'd rather just play out. Let's just let history play itself out. So it does seem like, I mean, we could look at some articles that Trump is getting a little bit tired of this the conflict not ending, at least on his terms. So, but yeah, that ties nicely into the Stubb stuff. So maybe you could look at the first article there. I have like one of them is from like a Norwegian paper, but if you don't want to do the translate, maybe you could look at another one.
Sorry, which one? Where did you link it?
You go to the media channel. I posted one. I think you should see
anything in the media channel.
Oh, sorry. I missed the chat.
Oh, you loaded them up.
Send it to you. I actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mixed them up a little bit.
I remember you talking about an article. I just can't remember getting it. Here we go. We are a professional podcasting studio, and if you pay money with super chats, your money will go to all of this technological marvel that is running the Longhouse. Let's see here. So we'll run this through the Google Translate machine. This is from a Norwegian paper. We like to do that because it gives us a bit of at least Nordic sort of angle on the thing. Maybe they'll write about something that the British maybe won't. So President Stubb, we're moving towards distrust. That's what he's saying. Let's see. Just bring the original. Finland's president of Finland reveals frustration after a golf meeting with U.S. president. So here he's meeting with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is losing patience with Vladimir Putin and is frustrated that Russia will not agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine. This is how Finland's President Alexander Stubb summarizes the informal meeting with Trump after the two met to play golf this weekend. The two spent Sunday at Trump's Mar-a-Lago compound in Florida. Quote, "It was a combination of impatience and a bit of frustration," Stubb said of Trump's attitude towards Putin to Sky News.
So,
according
just
to the
commenting quickly, of course, we have to take into account that the way that he probably tells this interview is very much in the way that he wishes to shape the perception as well, right? And I guess this is a part of the fine play of diplomacy here, that he's just like Starmer or Macron, they're trying to sort of put their finger on the scale of Trump and just get into his ear on occasion. And Trump's like Stubb seems to have cracked it here, because he instead of doing anything else, he went for the golf stuff, which seems to have been the secret to getting in Trump's ear. I think the Japanese guy Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated. He had success in Trump's first term with what would you call the American-Japanese relations, because they shared a common interest in golf. And so I think Stubb picked up on that. I don't know if they say that in the article, but they did like a golf tournament together, and they played on a team, and they beat like Lindsey Graham and some other guys. And during that time, it seems like Stubb was able to insert some more sort of like anti-Russian, anti-Putin narratives into Trump's ear. so that's like, that might affect the sort of directionality.
Remo worm tongue style.
So he's like the last guy who talked to Trump. But that seems to be a thing. It's like it's like the last guy he talked to seems to change the state that he is in.
In like large companies, you get this a lot as well, where whenever you're talking to someone who's further up the food chain than you're essentially kind of just talking to whatever meeting these people were in last. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah. I hate that kind of thing. But yes, it does seem to map. So I'm just going to read on. According to the Finnish president, who visited Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Monday, Trump is, quote, the only one who can negotiate a peace, a ceasefire, because he's the only one Putin is afraid of. Stubb says they talked a lot about the ceasefire and the frustrations Trump had that Russia would not commit to it. This confirms reports of a change in Trump's attitude towards the Russian leader. Trump has previously seemed more than willing to let let Putin have the benefit of the doubt, and has instead put enormous pressure on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. But Putin's rejection of a 30-day ceasefire changes this, according to the Finnish leader. If there was a pendulum between trust and distrust, the Russian activity in recent weeks has proven that we are moving more towards the side of distrust, Stubb says. He's now calling for massive sanctions against Russia if the country does not accept the ceasefire within a deadline that he believes should be put to Easter. I think we need a colossal amount of sanctions on April 20th if the Russians do not comply with this ceasefire, says Stubb. I guess this is Stubb calling, not Trump.
Yes.
Trump pissed on Putin. I think he's pissed about Putin. Or fed up with Putin. Donald Trump has said this weekend that he's very dissatisfied with President Vladimir Putin's comments after the Russian president criticized the credibility of Volodymyr Zelensky. "I'm very angry and pissed off," Trump said in a phone call with NBC News. Trump responds specifically to Putin's recent statements that Ukraine needs a UN-led transitional government, which in practice would push out Zelensky. Both the UN and Zelensky have rejected this proposal. "This is not going in the right direction," said the American president. Now, this is kind of strange considering how sort of anti-Zelensky Trump has been over the past couple of weeks. Of course, maybe it was a strategy to sort of just try to fast-track this by pushing Zelensky out. Now that didn't work, he's going to have to pivot, right?
Yeah, this seems to be a problem now, right? Because now you do have Zelensky agreeing to some form of a ceasefire, Trump pushing for some form of ceasefire, and even these European leaders doing it. And then, Russia isn't down for it. So then the narratives have to change, right? And you see that also with some of these more pro-Russian posters, is that they used to be talking about we need a ceasefire agreement, and now they've sort of moved away from, well, this isn't realistic, and it's bad faith arguments from Donald Trump. I mean, it was never going to happen, and so on. So. And of course now he's threatening these tariffs, right, on Russia, which seems to be almost completely pointless because Russian trade with the United States is so minuscule anyway, and it's not really any major type of problem. I don't think anybody takes this seriously, and you see that as well in the betting markets, right? I don't know if you want to go there now, but if you go on Polymarket and look at these polls, if like, okay, will the Ukraine war reach a ceasefire by the first 90 days, for example? That's tanked in the toilet. It's like, it's below 10%. By summer, it's reached below 50%, and by even by December 2025, it's below 50% now. Because I think in the aftermath of this, because Putin says no, and like this kind of threat of American tariffs seems so weak because there's so little trade between these two countries to begin with. I think
in the sense that Russia has sort of stabilized after the initial waves of sanctions from the EU. They're sort of sitting pretty in the stalemate right now. I mean, they're not really moving forward, but they're not losing that much by just sitting there. And Trump has, in a sense, more to lose by not finishing off this conflict.
Yeah, he comes off as the desperate party. That's the problem here, and he doesn't want to do that. But Putin feels like he has more time than Trump, and he is probably right. I guess that's sort of
Putin,
how
like everyone else at the WEF, feels like they can just wait out Trump.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most realistic in Putin's case. Even though he is old, he is still younger than Trump, right? And he doesn't really have any successors to worry about. He can sort of just sit back and wait this out, because maybe in 4 years there'll be somebody else at the White House who completely changes directions. And I think Trump knows that as well. So he's not in a good position. I mean, if Trump was, let's say, like in some different universe where Trump was like totally serious about this and wanted to use sanctions, right? That I'm coming back to his campaign, because he was talking about stuff like, well, if I can get the oil prices down, for example, or then the war is going to be over because they can't finance the war through selling oil. There are European countries currently, like Hungary, like Slovakia, like Austria or something, that are importing more Russian oil than they ever have been, right? And people are making article about that, how Europe, quote unquote, is importing more oil than ever, even though the war is going on. But if you look at by country, it paints a different picture. It's the good boys like Denmark, for example, are sort of forced to buy expensive Norwegian gas, whereas it's more the sort of the Russia aligned countries that are buying more cheaper Russian gas than they've ever bought. So because Trump is closer with Orban, he could probably reach, guys, what is his name, the Fico from Slovakia. And so he could just put pressure on those countries through sanctions and then force them to, okay, you have to buy Norwegian oil, you have to buy something else. We can support you, we could float your economy or something. And then to actually turn all the screws on the European sanctions to make sure that actually properly works to cut off the oil revenues, which would have been, there's many avenues that could have been taken. But if you don't want to put soldiers on the ground, you don't want to increase the military pressure, then just like tightening the screws on the economic thing diplomatically through Europe would be, I think, the best option available. And nobody's talking about that. But to me, at least, if you can put pressure on European countries the way that he's doing, and you demand that Canada close their border and Mexico close their border, or else you're going to tariff them to death, then you could probably do that with Hungary as well. But this just never shows up as an option. So there is a kind of lack of seriousness there.
Trump threatened to impose a 50% tariff on Russian oil if he believes Russia is delaying the peace deal. He also said that there's a psychological deadline for Russia to agree to a ceasefire. If I feel that they're just keeping us waiting, I will not be happy with that, Trump warned. Kremlin's answer. In response to Trump's statement, the Kremlin says Putin is still absolutely open to contact with Trump and that a conversation can be arranged when needed. The Kremlin also points out that Trump's statements were reproduced in paraphrase and is not direct quotes. The fighting continues in Ukraine. Russia attacked Kharkiv for the second night in a row, and according to Zelensky, Russia has fired over 1,000 drones in the past week. Finland's President Alexander Stubb has proposed that on April 20, April 20 is a suitable date for a complete ceasefire without conditions. So I guess that's what we're aiming for. We'll see.
Yes.
We'll see as it goes.
I just wanted to, for appreciation's sake, I linked a Fox News interview on YouTube with Alexander Stubb because I felt like it's just such a brilliant example of how to balance out transatlantic diplomacy in a way that I feel like no other politician is doing. He's being interviewed, and this is before Trump is elected, right? He's being interviewed on Fox News, where he's talking a bit about like American-Finnish relations, and then the host is trying to bait him into sort of anti-Biden stuff, and he doesn't bite, right? As he has not bitten on anti-Trump stuff, and neither anti-Zelensky stuff. So he's been able to, in spite of hostilities, between Trump, Zelensky, other European leaders, to not really put anybody down and be everybody's friend, right? It's like this is the kid in school who's like friends with everybody somehow. Whereas you see with a lot of other European leaders, like Giorgia Meloni, for example, it's been reported that she deleted all of the photos that she had with Zelensky, for example, on her social media profile after that White House session. So it's like this kind of cool kids table. It's like Zelensky's out of the cool kids table, so we'll just delete our history. We'll unfriend Zelensky from Facebook or whatever. But
what's that friendship ended with meme? Now
French is that now Trump's new friend now, but Stubb is able to do the balancing act, I think, better than anybody else. And let's just see the interview, and you can sort of see how he does it.
Yeah, just let me know when you want to pause.
Mr. President, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
It's a little belated, but welcome to NATO as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit too late. Better late than ever.
So, as you know, because you were here for the week, there are concerns among members of the president's own party as to his cognitive decline, his fitness for office. Here's what...
Just, this was 8 months ago at least, so this was before the election, right? Just making sure everyone is aware.
One senior European diplomat who was at NATO told one U.S. news outlet, quote, "It's a very weird feeling to be in Europe listening to the President of the United States, and you're more stressed about whether he will go off script than being excited to listen to the leader of the free world. You're worried if he knows which direction he's going, or whether he's going to fall, or what he's going to forget, or if he'll say North Korea when he meant South Korea. It's just a weird experience." Do you share those concerns?
Well, for me, it wasn't a weird experience, albeit this was my first NATO summit ever, and I certainly don't want to get involved in American domestic politics. I think the NATO summit was a raving success. I look at it from the perspective of international relations. We gave a very good deterrent to...
Very diplomatic answer.
He's being baited.
Just a nudge redirection and then into the successes. Yeah. What?
Talking about Biden's dementia or whatever, which is like this is what this is the red meat that the Fox News viewers want to hear, right? And it would have been, I imagine if I was him, it would have been cathartic for me to probably talk about like how Biden doesn't know which direction he's moving in or something. But he knows why he's there. He's there on business. So.
Yeah.
To Russia and to Putin. We had quite strong language on China. I quite enjoyed the summit.
Right. Okay. But at the same time, the president, who was leading the NATO conference here in the United States, made several gaffes at that news conference last night, some of which we want to play here.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
Oh, and now they have like okay, I'm just going to skip through this because we all know it, but it's just very Fox News to be like, and now you're going to have to comment on this, right?
Does that inspire confidence in you?
Well, I mean, again, I spent the better part of 48 hours with the president and with 32 other allies. I think the atmosphere was very good. The conversation was very good and very constructive.
I mean, I don't want to belabor a point, but when you have the leader of the free world, which is what the American president is known as, going to bed at 8 o'clock, his adversaries, Xi Jinping of China, who is
probably just waking up because of time zones. Insane. Right? How are we going to compete with that? When Biden goes to bed, China wakes up. It's over, right?
Is a major player in the problems of the world.
Ultra radical centrist asks, is Stubb part of the Swedish minority? Yeah, if you look at our Finland stream, we have the ethnicities of Finland chart, and Stubb is like a classic Finno-Swede. He's like I think they almost must have like modeled the meme on him.
Yeah, they did actually. That the meme. I don't know if we have like the 5 races of Finland meme. I think they modeled the Finno Swede on him, but he looks like this kind of standard Swedish bureaucrat phenotype with like a slight Finnic slant to him. But it's just perfect. It's just it represents. He represents himself and his kind of archetype perfectly.
Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, the Ayatollah, they're not going to bed at 8 o'clock. Does the United States, because a lot of Democrats feel this, do you believe the United States needs a more robust leader? Perhaps someone of your age.
Well, probably 2 points on that in general. You'll probably know that I'm a very avid pro-American. I've studied, I did my undergraduate work here, and I've always followed a lot of American politics. The biggest worry I have about American politics right now is that it's so divided and so polarized, and the whole political debate that you have is so toxic, and I don't want the free world to follow that. I want there to be more respect. So more worried about the national internal climate in the U.S. If I look at foreign policy all the way from the George W. Bush to Obama to Trump and to Biden, I still think it's very steadfast. It's on track. We have this sort of large Western alliance which the United States is leading, regardless of who is the president.
Stubb is a certified plan truster.
Yeah, no, he knows why he's there. Like, he's just there to maintain. He didn't take the bait, and you don't need to watch the rest of the interview.
I can feel the news anchor seething, even though the camera isn't here, because he won't take the bait. Oh, and here we have Mr. Jens in a moment.
But we hear all of this talk sort of through back channels among folks in NATO that they're hoping that Donald Trump doesn't become president again because they fear for what might happen, particularly with NATO if Donald Trump becomes president. But let me go back to November 14th of 2019 when Jens Stoltenberg visited the White House and President Trump and said this about the visit.
This shows that the clear message from President Trump is having a real impact. This is making NATO stronger. The reality is that NATO is actually stronger and more agile than we have been for many years.
So despite all of the complaints, Jens...
This is total Nordic victory right here. All right.
Stoltenberg was quite happy about what Trump was doing, saying that him demanding that NATO nations come to the table with 2% of their gross domestic product toward defense is making NATO stronger. He said that NATO had gathered in more than $100 billion more than it had before because of Trump's policy. So is a return of Trump really something to worry about?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't put it that way. I would actually like to give Trump credit because I think he was right on the 2% limit. And look, in 2014, out of the allies, only 3 reached that level. I think in 2018, it was something like 10. Now it's 23. Would that have happened if Trump hadn't pushed for it? I don't think so. Would it have happened without circumstance? Probably not. But we're moving on that right track. Secondly, a lot of people forget that during the Trump administration, America actually increased its military presence in Europe. And to be honest, I'm really happy as a new ally that we've just forged a defense cooperation agreement, DCA agreement with the United States. We have a lot of American soldiers. We have a lot of American material. We're going to do a lot of work on military policy with the U.S. So I'm probably less worried than some of the pundits.
Including new icebreakers.
Oh, yes.
We've only got 2 of those, so we could use more.
And you know how it goes. 80% of the world's icebreakers are designed in Finland. 60% are made in Finland. Now we have this wonderful ice pact together with Canada and the U.S.
As I mentioned, I was in Finland with President Trump a number of years ago. I think it was 2018. Had a lovely...
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. He's walking the tightrope.
High five for icebreakers. I mean, this one of the Twitter users that I follow, handle Cornucopia, this was a Finn. He mentioned that I mean, Stubb's popularity in Finland has been sort of so-so. He was viewed with a lot of suspicion because he's like this transatlantic guy, like he studied abroad, and apparently it's Finns can correct me if they watch, but that's not considered high status in Finland. They have like a very robust academic system, and if you are like this sort of Mr. Worldwide type, that's not entirely trustable apparently as opposed to having been some kind of native Finn who stayed behind in Finland to actually study at those universities. But because of this international diplomacy, he seems to have had a bit of a revival in popularity. So I thought that was interesting to mention.
Interesting. Julefroy says, by the way, the news anchor is a former rock music reporter from Canada. He's come a long way. Interesting.
That is interesting. Right. But yeah, the next...
Cyber Ninja Zero says, Europe must pay for its own occupation now. When Britain tried this with India, it ended up losing India, as is the fate of all empires that task the colonies with keeping themselves in line. And then he adds, so overall, a good thing. And I think I agree. The world is a lot more interesting now than it was half a year ago. So...
but yeah, about the interesting stuff, there's been the new Donald Trump Liberation Day tariffs.
Yes.
I linked the tweet in the media channel. I mean, you could either read the article about it, because
I have an article loaded here, so just give me a moment.
Yeah, or we could just go right to just looking at it. But yeah, let's see if the article's not too long. We could.
Well, it's basically like 3 words and then the list.
Perfect.
Trump's tariff, the full list from The Guardian. U.S. President Donald Trump yesterday produced a chart of all the new tariffs he was announcing affecting trade with countries across the world. Here's the list as he displayed it. The president displayed the top of his list from a podium in the White House Rose Garden and later published a longer version. Note that the tariffs charged to the USA in Trump's formulation include trade barriers, so don't necessarily align with the tariffs published by other countries concerned. So, here we have, on the left side, the percentage of U.S. tariffs and then tariffs charged to the USA, like counter tariffs, I assume. What do you want to look at first?
Tariffs charged to the USA. This is a number they essentially made up, right? I mean, if you had the original list, they write something like, I'll just try to find it so I can see, because they like. I
can find the list for you.
Yeah. It's funny
if you just look at USA discounted reciprocal tariffs is what they call it. And then they have tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers.
Yeah. So exactly how it's sort of, it's just kind of a bit of a finger in the air number. Doesn't seem to be any kind of hard formula or something they use to document this. So it's really about like how they feel about it. And yeah, if you go down the list, China on top, this is predictable.
Yep.
As to you're trying to face down the new face down the kind of new geopolitical adversary and being more serious about squeezing
to their greatest ally.
17 to Israel, even though Israel promised to remove their tariffs on the United States previously, so they still get slapped with the tariff. That's quite interesting. So
but they also have 33 going the other way. I'm not sure. I guess it's CPUs Israel produce a lot of that's consumed in the US.
I mean, because they go in the other way. It's sort of, again, the norm then, I guess, for people who are not familiar, it's not that what the United States is introducing is like a blanket tariff on everything. But what you typically have is that, what you typically have is a country will put tariffs on certain industries they want to protect, either for security reasons or for like political reasons. Say like farming is a typical thing. That's what you have in Norway. Cheese, dairy products, fishing and stuff. They want to protect that consumer base in Norway and protect that producer base. So that's tariffed. But then you have other things like products and services that have very low tariffs, if nothing. So that's the typical thing. So and that's the situation with most of these countries as well. They will have some products that they will tariff from the United States and other things they don't. So this number that they've created here is sort of just like, well, we feel like that we feel like that's what it is. But what they will do in retaliation, that's on the left side or in the second column, is a blanket tariff on everything. And the what is it? Two things that stand out. Look at, say, Sri Lanka here, 44%. The Vietnam, 46%. Like Laos, I think was I can't find it here, but it was a very high
Indonesia
percentage.
32.
Cambodia 49%.
These are like huge, like a lot of clothing, right?
Yeah. That's the thing that I thought was interesting, because it's like these are relatively poor countries. I mean, they're sort of on the path to industrialization. They're not quite at the sort of Western European level or something, and they still rely a lot on these kind of industrial sweatshops, let's say lower standard of living and lower standard of work, workers' rights and so on. But the question is like how you would tariff these countries so highly when the stuff that they make is like T-shirts, sandals, like just shoes, caps, standard off-brand like consumer clothing, or certain food imports like rice. Vietnam exports black pepper. That's one of the few places that you can grow that in the world. So these are like just standard consumer household items, and like say like black pepper, for example, you can't grow that in the US. There's very few places that you can actually grow it. Coffee and these things, it's maybe you can make a little bit of it on Hawaii. And so this is essentially just going to be a pretty large price increase, because if they're going to keep importing, they have to pass some of this on to the consumer. So you just have to expect the consumer price of a lot of things in the United States to just go up by quite a bit. And the puzzling thing for me with this is like, okay, if we try to steelman the idea of the America 2.0, right? The Trump kind of 4D chess sane washer route here, that they want to bring manufacturing back to the US. Okay, fine. But I would think that they are now sort of like the apex predator of service economies, and they want to sort of downgrade to a manufacturing economy. But I would imagine they want to downgrade to like a high-level manufacturing economy where they make, like final stage, high value added, computer bits, like putting the computers together, putting the cars together, ship assembly, for example, military stuff, like putting together the tanks at the end of the line and bringing them out, like this kind of like high value add stuff, advanced components, stuff like that, and not sweatshops, which is essentially like, is this what they want? Like, I mean, okay, you can't just downgrade to like German manufacturing and then have the chinks make your T-shirts. They actually want to do that like autarkically, just
guess we're going out picking cotton again, boys. Right.
I guess you have some candidates to get into that industry, but I mean, it's just puzzling to me, because I don't get the impression that Americans are generally keen on manufacturing jobs at all. But if you are to rank a sort of hierarchy of manufacturing jobs, I think the sweatshop stuff, like making sandals, it's pretty low. Okay, the American listeners can correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is not what I imagined when they're like, okay, we're getting manufacturing back.
Yeah, we're getting
back to the golden
back.
age. Is that you're going to have like sewing factories in Wisconsin or something? So that's the first puzzle.
It's a tough sell, at least.
The second thing that I thought was strange is that the EU is being tariffed by 20%, and there's been a lot of ruckus from Trump about like the EU has been created to destroy the US, and it's just going to mess with them, and they're a tough negotiator. And okay, 20%, this is a lot lower than many of these other countries. And you know who's higher? Well, other non-EU European countries. Norway came out pretty good at like 15, but countries like Switzerland and Liechtenstein and Serbia, like they're way above 30%, between 30 and 40. So it's almost double what the EU charges. And like, I would at least think that just as a sort of incentive structure, when like JD Vance talks about the common values and the they want a Europe that's like not the European Union, but like separate states that are based or whatever. I think Switzerland is quite close, right? That's one of these these examples that a lot of these anti-EU types bring up. Like, okay, we shouldn't join the EU. We should be like Switzerland and just be neutral and have guns and direct democracy and be rich and like all this stuff. And they're just getting smashed by like almost 37% tariffs by the United States. So there is this sort of schizophrenic messaging here as to like who is getting the most stick here from Trump, as opposed to what they actually want Europe to do. So yeah, I found this I find it quite strange.
But
I don't
in
know if you have
Switzerland's
any,
case as well, I mean, yeah, it's not a direct sort of tax on Swiss manufacturing in that sense, but if it sort of cools off buying from the US, then Switzerland is probably just going to look for opportunities elsewhere in the EU, right? So you're sort of having the opposite effect. Instead of bringing the EU in line, you're forcing it to strengthen itself.
Yes, but of course, the America is the top consumer, right? That's the thing. They just have a rate of consumption that is unrivaled by any other.
They're just
market.
doing it out of like, we're just, you know, such a big client that you have to trade with us anyway.
It's very hard because the Eurozone consumption level is just not at the same level as what the United States. It's not even close. And of course, now like the euro has been strengthened by this, so you might be able to buy more, consume a little bit more. You know, the EU could do some stimulus initiatives, which I don't think it's actually too unlikely. They might just try to stimulate the economy a little bit and encourage people to buy, just make some more recreational pools or whatever, or buy some more Christmas lights, Rolexes from Switzerland.
More worms in the flour.
More worms in your cereal. You can get high protein worms in your bread. Now the bug burgers with extra salsa. Yeah, I mean, all joking aside, but this will have a quite dire impact on, I guess, most economies now. So there's a lot of fear and loathing in the markets.
Governor in chat says sewing factories in Wisconsin is probably better than nothing in Wisconsin, but honestly, the GOP will probably end up importing 10 to 20,000 Haitians to man those sewing machines if they get built, I assume. And yeah, that's something very real that I could see happening, right?
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, that was a part of the whole, eating the cats and dogs saga, right? The Springfield in, was it Pennsylvania or something? Or was it Ohio? Springfield, Ohio, yes. That, they had, there was some manufacturing jobs there, but it was sort of the Haitians that were doing them. And of course, it's not super attractive jobs, but I don't see a lot of what you consider the native-born Americans just kind of lining up for those jobs either. So
I also noticed something interesting down at the bottom here. We're getting to the like weirder countries or things that aren't really countries. We have Svalbard and Jan Mayen, who are Norwegian regions, and Heard and McDonald Islands, which, these are Arctic islands where I don't think anyone lives. Like, they're technically nations, but I think maybe there's like a research station or something on some of these places. But they're getting the blanket tariffs as well. So
yeah, I guess that's a joke.
I think this is British. If the Brits are sending, snow and penguins from the Heard Islands to the US, well, maybe you can send them somewhere else. Right.
They're filling up the ice machines on all of the American gas stations. Right. So,
I think someone just pressed select all in the drop-down list of countries.
I suspect something like that. I mean, I've seen many jokes already and memes made about it. Okay.
All right. Well, moving on. Should we do a quick thing on Musk before?
Yeah, sure. If you have an article or something, you could
just 5
bring
minutes.
That up.
Sure. 1 moment. I will. Let's see here. I'll use Politico. That's a decent one. Whoops. And we'll get away from this. And that is the wrong tab. So we'll try again. Here we go. Trump tells Inner Circle that Musk will leave soon. The president is pleased with Elon Musk, but the decision comes as the tech mogul increasingly looks like a political liability. So this is essentially, it's not, as far as I know, been confirmed officially, but there's rumbling that, once Doge is done with its thing in the coming weeks, Musk will essentially step away from the cabinet or from the administration. So maybe there'll be less cringe going on in the future. The President Donald Trump has told his inner circle, including members of his cabinet, that Elon Musk will be stepping back in the coming weeks from his current role as governing partner, ubiquitous cheerleader, and Washington hatchet man. The president remains pleased with Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency initiative, but both men have decided in recent days that it will soon be time for Musk to return to his businesses and take on a supporting role, according to 3 Trump insiders who were granted anonymity to describe the evolving relationship. Musk's looming exit comes as some Trump administration insiders and many outside allies have become frustrated with his unpredictability and increasingly view the billionaire as a political liability, a dynamic that was thrown into stark relief Tuesday when a conservative judge Musk vocally supported lost his bid for a Wisconsin Supreme Court seat by 10 points. So he's now, he's now making things difficult for the powers that be, I guess.
Yeah, he seems like there's a lot of loose cannons in this administration, but if he's showing up to these local elections and pouring so much money into it, it's not really helping, then it looks bad, right? I mean, I think he's like 0-for-3 or something in these election things. He doesn't seem to... I think he feels like he moved the 2020 Trump election, right? And he feels like he thinks he can just do that over and over again, but it turns out not. He can't. He's not really that popular.
Yeah,
and he's burnt a lot of the capital and good graces that he had with his the Tesla support base. And like honestly, I think that if he just pulls back now and just lets Trump take the attention and just slowly kind of tweets a little bit less, just de-escalates, that he could come back in 2026 and rehabilitate his image, actually, because things move so quickly. I think people are just going to forget about all the cringe that he did and accept him back again as the kind of like tech genius or like the green energy guy or whatever. He could even
that's a hard sell, but yeah, I can see it.
No, yeah. I mean, he could do a quote unquote redemption arc, a little sort of anti-Trumpian controlled rebellion or something. This kind of Luciferian arc. And win back the Tesla fan base. I wouldn't put I could actually see that working if they put some thought into it, because things happen so quickly now, and then people are focused on Trump and what he's doing. Then if he's like going out and saying, oh, I was wrong, and I'm against this Trump policy or whatever, I think he could fall back into good graces, and maybe people start bombing his Tesla dealerships.
Sorry, I lost audio for a second here. Okay, I think I'm back. Yeah, no, I definitely see the storyline to redeem him in 2026. I can see that. I'm not sure if it's worth going further into this article, or if we should just move on. I mean, that's the news. Musk might be stepping down. So you had something you wanted to talk about.
I guess it's a sort of like finishing. It's a bit of a rant. Like it's becoming like the sort of Bill Maher show.
You have your like last 20 minutes.
I do like the 20-minute rant. But this is something that I've been pondering a bit, because I did watch some more like the recent Frody Midtjord and Morgoth's review broadcast about like Europe's role in in this kind of post-American world, and like I guess there's been kind of change in the winds where it seems like some of these DR characters, at least the European ones, have taken to the position that I've had for a while. I mean, you talked about like my vindication arc on some of this, and I don't want to dwell too much on it, but it's a sort of like an interesting point on this, because I've been talking on these streams and trying to document the connection and I guess sort of the relation between like the sort of kind of like Russian messaging apparatus and the more like viral social media slopper accounts. But I've not spent as much time maybe pondering and meditating on some of these more high-end characters that are within like this, what I would consider like the Russian narrative media machine, right? And there's this nice little horseshoe there that exists, where on one end you have like the American right, like the MAGA, what's now like looks like more kind of like MAGA communist faction. But originally I would consider like the sort of right libertarian guys. And on the left you have the kind of more fervent, like left libertarian, anti-American foreign policy guys, say like Noam Chomsky, for example.
For sure.
Is he dead now or not? I'm not really sure. Like he's
he
just
seems more like a ghost every time I see a picture of him.
Yeah, I just seen so many fake like announcements.
No, I think he's still alive. He's 96
He's still
years
alive.
old.
Yeah, well, he just doesn't do that many media appearances, but he would have been kind of the
but his
spearhead
last
of that.
Nomara media, like 7 months ago or something, he looked extremely haggard. Yeah,
there isn't much left there, but on these haggard, I guess that's kind of, you have guys like him, you know, Glenn Greenwald would have been like the Blumenthal's and the Grey Zone guys, but I'm a little bit less interested in that, more interested in the right side of this stuff, and that's where we get to like the American libertarian scene, which is something that if you are in these circles in politics, you've been a fan. Right, you've been involved there at some point, and you move in. You get into the theory, get into the books, you get into the memes, and you get out of it, or you interpret it in some other way. But I just find,
and that's why it's so fun for me to use the socialism is when the government does this clip, because I veered off into Richard Wolfland with the workers' co-ops and just like standard, more like run of the mill communism instead of the international bit.
Yes, but again, I keep coming back to the American libertarianism and trying to understand how exactly does it work. And of course, I mean, you get it in principle. They will sit and talk about, okay, we read Ayn Rand, we read Ludwig von Mises. Hayek, I guess, is big with these people, but like none of this literature is really that big on foreign policy, as far as I can tell. It's mostly about economics and moral philosophy.
Yeah.
But when you look at the content that is produced by like this Mises caucus sphere of libertarian content creators, including Ron Paul, the Ron Paul Institute, Lou Rockwell, for example, Dave Smith, the comedian guy, Scott Horton with that book Unprovoked, Judge Knapp, these types of people, their content is just almost like 95% about foreign policy. And most of that is just about, how do we secure Russian foreign policy security interests? And you're just sitting and sort of puzzled by how do you go from like, okay, non-aggression principle, low tax, to Russia should have a free hand in Europe and do whatever they like. This is kind of
which reminds me, I need to look up, Eggman again. Stefan Molyneux. What's his take on this?
Yeah,
because I feel like he never touched international stuff very much.
I wouldn't be surprised if he has just taken the same route, but he seems to be a little bit more disconnected in terms of like he's interested in psychology now. Like he went off to do on Odyssey, the platform, and he's just doing this kind of call-in shows where he's talking about personal relationships and that kind of stuff, and Bitcoin.
He was always good at that. Yeah.
And which is fine. I mean, at least he stayed within certain parameters, but you can't say the same for this entire American sphere. Because for me, there's a certain, I think I described it on Twitter, is that I feel like the American libertarian sphere, at least the Mises caucus, it is like a Western civilization death cult, or like a doomsday cult. And like I was like trying to talk to the various AIs and just like, okay, I make this statement, can you just like explain to me why I'm wrong here? And I try to just have this argument as to why is this not the case? Because they ideally, that you start with, most of them are Christian, right? This is where it comes to the Protestant. Maybe some of them are Catholics that have joined later. I think Tom Woods maybe is Catholic, and they also have, Christianity is considered sort of a universal philosophy. It's like, you have missionaries, you try to spread it, you want people to be Christian, you want to get the message out there. And libertarianism is also, I think, within most conventional understandings, a universalist philosophy. Right? You wish that everybody could be libertarian, and you want to spread the free markets, low taxes, non-aggression principle.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise the non-aggression principle just falls apart, right?
Yeah, it kind of does. But there you get to the question that, in fact, these libertarians are not universalists, they are particularists. And this is interesting because it's a kind of libertarianism for me, but not for thee type of thing. It's like hardcore sort of Hasidic Judaism or something, where
I want libertarianism for me, but not for thee.
Yeah, but
we can have libertarianism. What's the meme? Yeah. Libertarianism, but for
white people,
130 IQ Anglos.
150 IQ. So Scandinavian Aryans. But it's a kind of, they are only really interested in libertarianism for this subsection of Americans, and not really for anybody else. And to a very visible degree, it just gets a little bit on the bizarre side as to, they want libertarianism for themselves. They want, limited government as a domestic foreign policy thing to enact these principles that they have. And to do this, they're basically willing to aggressively almost work against any other country having anything that even resembles something like libertarian principles within kind of a realistic view, right? I think towards, say, because there's been some Twitter babble about the Baltics recently. There's things that have been happening with the Baltics, is that Estonia has denied the right of, say, non-citizen, like Russians and Belarusians, to vote in local elections. Usually they would be able to do that, but now if they're not citizens, they can't vote. EU members can still vote in local elections if they live there, but not the Russian ones. And this was, of course, sort of the same people who talk about undocumented voters in the US were sort of, Estonia is like Nazi, fascist, or whatever. And the same thing, like Lithuania had these rounds with these articles where they are removing, they're using like these saws to remove USSR brandings on their manhole covers and street signs and all these things, because they want to remove any trace of USSR heritage, which is also like the same slop accounts, like, oh, what a bunch of losers. But from a realistic point of view, the Baltic states, in my view, are a libertarian success story. Like, you have former communist states that have broken off into these smaller kind of city states that now, instead of being this kind of Soviet system, they went into this kind of collapse, a more sort of corrupt, fragile system, and they created stronger institutions and now have a relatively functioning, very close to like a free market. I think Estonia has like a flat tax of 25%. They have a very streamlined public sector where you could do everything digitally. And, they have, like, through the EU, relatively high movements. They've had high economic growth in these areas, relatively low immigration. Like, I think by every metric that you would think that this is like a Western success story. But from someone like Ron Paul has been against this from like the inception of it. He was against, extending them NATO membership. He's been against involving the United States there. He's been against their ascension to the EU. He's been against like every step that they've had to take to get from former Soviet corrupt shithole to functioning Western state. Ron Paul has opposed. And he has just consistently done this, like since the Bretton Woods system came online in the United States, predicting like doom. To me, like the what these libertarians call economic predictions is like the guy standing on the street with the end is nigh sign, essentially predicting hyperinflation and kind of like a total dollar collapse any moment since the 80s. Quite frankly, he has a very consistent record of doing at least that. He also has a super consistent record of really, like, any time Russia does anything to their neighbors in Eastern Europe, and they have a vote on whether like the United States should do anything about it, he votes no every single time. And this is interesting, right? Because, like, okay, what is essentially the rationale for this from the libertarian point of view? It's like they'll say, okay, we believe in non-aggression and we believe in diplomacy and peace, right? That's kind of the Mises, no taxes and peace or whatever, this slogan that they have. And so, like, okay, what is the American libertarian answer to, okay, the former USSR country wants to absorb another USSR country and just pull it back into this kind of crony capitalist system that they have? Well, they want to maintain a slight degree of like a modern liberal westernized system. And okay, so you're not going to do military interventionism to prevent that. Okay, right. You get you don't want your sons and daughters to die. Okay, right, fine. Okay, are you going to do like an economic sanction? Well, no, they're against that as well, because that would be against the free market, right? So according to this libertarian theory, it's like, well, if you're not allowing Russian oligarchs to store all their money, and like if they're plundering their neighboring nations, if they can't store that money in the United States real estate and buy into the US stock market and buy weapons from United States suppliers, then that's disrupting the free market. So you shouldn't involve yourself militarily. You should allow the United States to be like a market hub where like China and Russia can just buy as many weapons as they like to bully their neighboring countries. And okay, well, would you then at least show some diplomatic resistance? Like you go in the UN and just unanimously condemn the actions of these countries? No, they're against that as well. So essentially, when these kind of like Russia-tarians are talking about, we need diplomatic solutions, it is like this kind of Ron Paul, Judge Knapp stuff, where there's not a lot of diplomacy, there's not a lot of dialogue. They just go to these countries like Russia and they just take their talking points and launder their talking points to their own audience, in a sense. And it's a completely one-way street. They don't do anything to promote libertarianism inside Russia, right? Because that would be considered foreign influence, foreign interference, even though it's like, okay, maybe just ask them if they want to change their system to allow for a more kind of libertarian model or something. They never do that. They essentially just show up on Russia Today and badmouth U.S. foreign policy. They go to Moscow and interview Sergei Lavrov. They'll never speak against him or anything like this. So it is like this complete kind of one-directional thing where, like, whether this is like for some ideological reason or some other type of reason, they just continuously just serve as like these mouthpieces in the West for like these other foreign regimes that are significantly less libertarian, less like what they would want a country to be like, and just argue that they should have a free hand in controlling how their neighbors run their politics in order so that they can have like 2% less tax in the US or something. And it's just, I mean, you see what I'm getting at here. I just find
I see what you're getting at.
Yeah. Entire sphere to be just completely baffling on so many levels. I mean, how does it work exactly? Like, I don't think they even get to that point where, because they're not really interested. They just want to sink the dollar. Essentially, this is like the one thing that they want ideologically. The end the Fed. That's their motto, right? They just want to collapse the ability to have like a lender of last resort in the United States in favor of like having many small currencies. Maybe they can achieve that like with their new, crypto czar David Sachs, so that every workplace is going to issue their own crypto currency that you can sit and speculate on or whatever. But aside from that, they just seem to have really nothing, even in terms of like regime security. They're not even interested in. Like, they're not interested in the United States as a kind of geopolitical player that has interest. I mean, at least Mersheimer will admit to that. but yeah. Even that they won't admit to. Their own country having geopolitical interest. That's kind of less interesting than them just kind of breaking up the local, like the federal currency. So,
yeah.
I mean, I've talked for a while, but you saw, because you're seeing. It's not just them either. I mean, you're having the same things in Norway, but like the remaining, libertarian influencers. What's that guy's name? Rune something, Ødegaard.
Escort, yeah.
Yeah, who was like selling the book about how like the kroner, the fraud coin, or whatever. Like,
Bitcoin is the future.
Bitcoin is the future. Crypto is the future, and the fiat system is going to go the way of the like mail by doves or whatever, or like travel by horse and carriage. But it just becomes like this sort of doomsday prophecy cult that combined with this sort of algorithmic marketplace, they just sit and sell contrarianism, right? I mean, you
exactly.
can see it here.
And it's really annoying because it's turning. It's essentially like, it's like the most cringe way of becoming sort of like an insurgent in your own country, right? Like, if you want to be like, oh, the West is fallen, everything is bad and everyone's going to hate me, right? You can go two ways. This is one of them, and I guess the other one is to do a terrorism, right? But this is the more cringe way to do it. Just sit and tweet about how any day now, Putin, may his soldiers arrive soon, peace be upon him, is so much smarter than we are, and it's over, and he wouldn't even want to invade us because it's so over. So we should just let them take Ukraine or something.
Yeah, but these are the guys that are counter-signaling European rearmament, right? And
yeah, exactly.
These guys like the EVA, what's the name?
But it's no longer from a libertarian perspective. That's what's annoying.
Yeah,
right?
Libertarianism is just sort of like their core ideology.
That fell by the wayside. Like at this point, like, are you getting a check in the mail? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of these guys, it is really sort of the incentives that are kind of set up this way for them to just push that narrative. And some of it's because of fake engagement, and other parts of it is just like selling contrarianism to people. But yeah, how much, it is very easy also if you wanted to give these people money through, crypto especially, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
I think it would be quite easy to
send
him, just send him some crypto if he's saying the right things here. But it's getting almost to just like the point of the absurd with some of these people. It's like the only thing they're writing about now is like how we shouldn't do anything, we shouldn't rearm the country, and even if Putin wanted to, it's like Europe is too gay to even bother with in the first place. Like what even is this at this point? Like you can't even say that it's petty nationalism, even it's just like masochistic nationalism or something. I mean, maybe I'll come up with some fancy neologism to explain what this is, but I don't. I just wanted to do that rant because I find these people fascinating.
Very funny, by the way. Grotesque. I can't buy the Bitcoin book with Bitcoin. I have to pay fiat currency for it.
Yeah, of course. That's the usual thing. They'll sell you the product and you have to pay for it in dollars.
Yeah. Let's see what people are saying in the comments. Let's see here. It's very easy to explain. Euros want welfare benefits. Military stuff costs money. Well, I think a lot of Europeans, at least now, are not opposed to spending more on military and less on other things. So that's not really a part of the discussion. Libertarianism tended to be Babby's first political dissidence, especially for European right adjacents. I can see that, but the thing is, there's still room for libertarianism, right? You have people in our spheres like Jay Greenriver, etc., who are very, I would say, excellent defenders of libertarianism.
Yeah,
while also and what's his name? I'm blanking on it. Oh no. Sorry. Not Black Horse, but Radical Liberation. Thank you. There it is. Thanks, Brain. Radical Liberation, who are very good defenders of libertarianism and libertarian ideology, I guess, or approaches, and how to sort of interweave them with the particularism that seems to be more in line with reality. But this isn't that kind of libertarianism. It's just, maybe you start with it as political dissidence, but then that turned into Russia Today talking points at some point.
Well, yeah, that's my. I mean, I spent very little time actually arguing against any libertarian points because I feel like we're so far away from that now. I'm not arguing against like, okay, you want free market economics, lower taxes, or sort of less oversight, or something like this, or like stronger private property rights. I mean, it's really just about like, how do you approach that from a foreign policy perspective, and is that foreign policy perspective basically just like, okay, I just want that stuff for like my little clique here, and like everywhere else in the world can just become less libertarian as a consequence, right? Which,
yeah,
I feel like it's a sort of what you say. It's like a penny wise, a pound foolish, because foreign and domestic policy is intertwined inevitably. I mean, I think these sort of Russiatarians who are sort of egging on, we should just get out of the rest of the world and not try to spread libertarianism will essentially just find themselves being like the last libertarian place on earth until there's no other libertarian places on earth. There is a reason why countries with similar policies usually ally together. They have similar domestic and foreign policy, right? It's not because they're thinking like Ron Paul. It's because they sort of see that there's a connection between the stuff you're trying to promote, outside your country. It's has a symmetry with the stuff you're promoting on the inside.
Yeah.
And it's hard to sort of separate that. If you like the world around
I
you
don't
is just
know.
becoming more.
It doesn't have to be, but it would require a much, let's say, harder hand to enforce, right? I mean, you're looking at some authoritarian, I guess, moves to be able to enforce that, right?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, that is
essentially Starship Troopers, I guess.
It's inevitable, but like at some point, say like you just kind of created this Ron Paul super non-interventionist marketplace for other mega powers. How long until you basically you sort of been feeding? You created the economic zone, ironically enough, and you've just sort of been feeding these other powers until they're like large enough to take you on, and like. Why do they give a shit about libertarianism at that point? Like, if you haven't done anything to try to make them more libertarian or to try to weaken their kind of anti-libertarian impulses or like anything to neuter them to ensure your own foreign policy interest, it just seems completely backwards to me as to how they are. But they are just so ideologically like just committed to this version of like geopolitical seppuku that I mean. I didn't think it was this bad, but if you start looking into like the Ron Paul Institute and like all they talk about is just ensuring Russian security interests. That's it. Yeah. And it's just nothing else. So I that's what I have to say.
Javier Olivia says, does libertarianism work anyplace other than a college campus with other people's money to shield you from reality? I mean, in history, there have been libertarian societies to various degrees, and I think Radical Liberation has a lot of good streams and series on this. I think their series called like Not So Wild West, for example, which talks about how the sort of the libertarianism of the Wild West led to a lot safer society than we would imagine today, all things considered. There's other examples as well, but check out his channel if you want to have some looks at that. But of course, these are always particular to a time and a place with a certain people, and once you introduce a lot of different sort of lenses, I guess, through multiculturalism, etc., maintaining libertarianism becomes incredibly hard. Let's see here. Cyber Ninja Zero says, Ludwig, how schizophrenic would you think a, quote, drop all the sanctions but rearm anyway strategy would be for Europe? I think the dissidents on Twitter would be pro that. That's assuming that the dissidents on Twitter pose a credible threat, right?
Well, drop the sanctions on whose sanctions are you talking? Euro sanctions on Russia or the United States sanctions on Europe? Because I'm not sure.
I don't know. Maybe you can follow.
Who is supposed
I assume Russia, but that doesn't make.
Well, I mean, I guess you could make an argument for that, which is like, okay, well, you could use their cheap gas to rearm faster. But I think the Russian calculation for that, if they feel like this is going to be used against us geopolitically down the line in a way that's not beneficial, I don't think they would accept it. That was certainly not. That was not Putin's idea when he was sort of opening these gas pipes to Europe, that Europe would use that to sort of build arms that they could use to defend themselves or use against Russia aggressively later. It was supposed to be the kind of the opposite, sort of opening up Europe to for Russia to do that against them. So that's kind of the contention there, is that I'm not sure if Europe is in this kind of aggressively remilitarizing mode, that Russia would see that as beneficial to fuel their war machine for them.
Also, on another note, I'm not sure if this is referring to anything we said. AA and Argent who are pro Europe rearming, but against joining the fray in Ukraine. I think a lot of nations in the EU aren't very keen on boots on the ground in Ukraine. So far, funneling, it sounds a bit callous, but funneling, weapons in there and money there and have the Slavs do what they do seems to be working. So, for a lot of European leaders. Let's see here. Roger Kolmala says the early USA had a weak federal government and strong local communities. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about. Yes, exactly. Let's see here. Anything else before we leave? No, I think we're getting to the end of the chat here. There's been a lot of good chatting going on, but nothing that I wanted to bring up. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Luddic Path, anything you would like to shill before we leave?
No, nothing. Just thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Yes, we'll see you next week. You can follow me on Twitter at Walrus in a Suit. You can follow Luddic Path if you want to, as well on Twitter. You can just search for us. Other than that, we'll be back next week with... I don't know. We'll see what the week brings us, I guess. I have some things in the chamber for maybe doing some book reviews, but it's taking a while. I have a lot of other things I need to read. I have to, cross the T's and dots the I's on the Karlstage presentation, etc. So everything is slower with the kid around. Before we leave, okay, let me scroll up. Bill Wilson had something. Weapons sales claim. They're asking about whether Russia has ever bought weapons from the U.S. That's something you mentioned, Luddic. Or was that a hypothetical?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they have, to be honest. But I think that if it was up to, say, Ron Paul, they wouldn't be against that. It's say like
okay, so you were speaking hypothetically. If the U.S. just sold weapons to everyone, Russia would just buy American weapons.
Yeah, I think that they would, like, okay, if you have a private company and have a Russian buyer that wants to buy that, like, what's the libertarian argument for? I mean, if you're not against, if they're not against sanctions, then why would they be against American private companies selling to buyers in Russia, for example? That was kind of my point. They're fundamentally against any kind of economic sanctions against other regimes. So, like, why would you just sell them weapons at that point?
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week. Have a good rest of your evening and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.